The fall of the Soviet Union, 1991. The end of a superpower, December 25th, 1991. A cold wind swept across Moscow as the Soviet flag, red, heavy with hammer and sickle, was lowered from the Kremlin for the last time. Below, a nation stood silent, watching a moment that would be remembered for generations. The Soviet Union, a superpower that had risen from the ashes of Imperial Russia, collapsed not through invasion or war, but from within. But how does an empire fall without a single shot? Let's go back. Birth of a giant. In 1917, Russia burned with revolution. After centuries under the rule of the Tsars, the people rose up. Under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, the Bolsheviks promised change, equality, power to the workers, a new world. By 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, was born. It grew fast, united by communist ideology, and ruled with iron discipline. When Joseph Stalin took power, the Soviet Union became a global force. But the cost was immense. Millions died in purges, gulags, forced famines. Dissent was crushed, but industry boomed, and the USSR emerged from World War II as one of the two global superpowers. Cold War, the long standoff. For over 4 decades, the world lived in fear of nuclear apocalypse. The Soviet Union and the United States faced off in a global chess match. The Cold War. It was a battle of ideologies, communism versus capitalism, East versus West. It played out in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, space, even in sports and culture. The Iron Curtain fell across Europe, nations divided, walls rose. Yet while the USSR appeared strong, a slow decay had already begun. The cracks appear by the 1980s, the Soviet economy was in crisis. Its command economy, where the state controlled everything, could no longer compete with the flexibility of the West. Technology lagged, factories were outdated, food shortages were common, corruption ran deep, people stood in line for bread, stores were empty, and there was no space for complaints, only silence. Then, in 1985, came a man with a new vision, Mikhail Gorbachev. Gorbachev's gamble. Gorbachev was different, young, modern, willing to reform. He introduced 2 bold policies. Perestroika, restructuring the stagnant economy, Glasnost, openness, a radical new transparency in government and media. He believed he could save socialism by reforming it. Instead, he unleashed forces that had been buried for decades. Suddenly, newspapers spoke openly, citizens demanded accountability, television showed protests. Republics like Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia demanded independence. Ukraine and Georgia followed. The empire was cracking. Eastern Europe breaks free. Meanwhile, the grip of Soviet influence over Eastern Europe was slipping fast. In 1989, the unthinkable happened. The Berlin Wall fell. East Germans flooded into the West. Soon, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, countries that had been under Soviet control, threw off their communist regimes. Gorbachev, unlike his predecessors, did not send in the tanks. He believed in change, but many in the Kremlin saw this as weakness. At home, Gorbachev's popularity collapsed. Reform was not bringing results, only more chaos. The coup of August 1991. Then came the moment that nearly changed everything. On August 19, 1991, hardliners in the Soviet government staged a coup. They believed Gorbachev had gone too far. They placed him under house arrest while on vacation in Crimea. Tanks rolled into Moscow, but they underestimated the people. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets in defiance. Standing atop a tank was Boris Yeltsin, the newly elected president of the Russian Republic. His voice rang out, "We will not go back." The coup collapsed after just 3 days, but the Soviet Union had been mortally wounded. A quiet collapse. After the failed coup, one by one, the republics declared independence. Ukraine voted overwhelmingly to leave. Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, they all followed. Even Russia, the heart of the Soviet Empire, moved to separate itself. Gorbachev tried to save the Union until the end, but there was no Union left to lead. On December 25, 1991, he resigned. The next day, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. Aftermath: a new world, 15 new nations were born from its ashes. Russia, the largest and most powerful, struggled through the 1990s with economic collapse, crime, and political turmoil. Other former republics faced war, poverty, and deep identity crises. But the world changed too. The Cold War was over. The United States stood alone as the world's sole superpower. The global order shifted, economically, militarily, politically, yet not everything disappeared. The legacy of the Soviet Union still echoes. In borders, in conflicts, in the tense dance between NATO and Russia, even in the war in Ukraine. The empire that died from within. The Soviet Union did not fall from a single event. It collapsed slowly, unraveling over years, from within, through fear, through silence, through ambition and failure. And when it finally fell, it left behind more questions than answers. Can a superpower truly vanish, or does it linger in memory, in myth, in power reborn? The red flag came down that winter night, but the story of the Soviet Union is not over.